Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, you weirdos. Jim here. And this week, we ended up having the Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 6 come out. And in my review, by the end of the review, I was talking of the idea that I think Mary Jane is in big trouble, that she kind of exposed her identity and relationship with Spider-Man in a way that does feel like it's kind of a sly way that Hickman and Checchetto put it in on what is a really fun moment, a really cool moment, a really kind of a pinup type of moment. But in the review, I had said that I think that there's some big trouble coming down, especially what led up to it. And I had some people agree with me, and I had some people who didn't agree with me, that they were, arguing about what it was and what it wasn't and whatnot. And I figured, what the hey? I'll do a video on this, give it a little more exposure, and we'll talk about what this might end up being, because Jonathan Hickman has been playing a lot with secret identities, even from the beginning where Peter, an older Peter, ends up feeling like he's missing something, and then through Tony Stark Iron Lad, he ends up becoming a later in life Spider-Man. But one of the big plays in this Ultimate Universe is that, lo and behold, fans are getting what they want. They're getting the family. They're getting Peter Parker married to Mary Jane, and they have kids, including a little girl named May. So you have May, who is actually the one who was the first to discover that her father was indeed Spider-Man, even though he didn't have a name at that point, didn't even have a costume, because in the second issue, you did end up having what was like a fashion show type deal. You ended up where May was deciding what costume she liked, ends up picking classic Spider-Man costume. But by the end of the issue, as a fun little thing, Spider-Man, her dad, Peter Parker, takes May and they start swinging around New York City. Now, you don't really know how much they've done it, what they're going with, whatnot. But if you do go back, and I'll show the frame from the issue, when they did do this, May is completely in costume. She actually has goggles on. Yeah, you could see her hair. But I think that if anybody would have seen this, if this was photo, that this was on video, I don't know that anybody would be able to make out who this little girl really is. A scarf is covering her face, and she's just a little girl. What sort of records are going to have on file about some little girl, random girl, let alone having goggles and that scarf, as I said, as they're having a little bit of a daddy-daughter swing about. And it was a really, really nice moment. Well, the idea of these secret identities and what it means to be a hero, that continued on. And it has been something that is one of the run-through lines in this. It's one of the big plot lines in this book, because in the issue where Peter and Mary Jane have a double date with Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn, the idea comes up again. And it's one of those where Harry, he reveals that indeed he has told Gwen everything. And he actually makes a joke. Gwen and Mary Jane go off to the bathroom together, as ladies will. And Harry's smiling, and Peter says, like, what are you smiling at? Oh, you haven't told her yet, have you? And he's like, well, of course not. And it goes with that idea of Peter saying, I haven't told MJ because, look, it's not that I don't trust her or anything. That would be ridiculous, but I have to protect them, don't I? And then Harry legitimately says, you seriously think you can live this life and insulate the people you love from the consequences? So he's saying, listen, it doesn't matter if you tell anybody or not. People are going to find out, and things are going to happen, and it might be better if they know. But Peter seems very, he really doesn't want to tell anybody. Like we said, May already knows. She walked in on it, but he had her promise, please don't tell anybody. This will be our little secret. And she seems to be able to keep it for about 4 months, is what she ends up saying. But in this past issue, where we end up having, and spoiler alert, if you haven't read the issue, you end up having Harry, Green Goblin, and Peter Parker, Spider-Man go up against Kingpin, something that Harry definitely wanted to do and has been trying to do, and they're really trying to find out what is going on in the shadows, the Illuminati type deal, the whole Makers Council, and who is connected to Fisk and who is above him. This is more Harry's thing. Peter's kind of there to be there. He's there because he's Spider-Man. It's also the play where this is Fisk who's running and calling the shots at the Daily Bugle where Peter works, all this stuff all rolled up into one. But even before they go and confront Fisk, there's again more talk about secret identities. You end up where it's just Harry and Peter. They're in their costumes, but you end up, Harry calls Peter Peter. Says, hey, Pete, hey, Peter. And Peter says, hey, don't use my name while we're in costume. Why wear a mask if you're going to do that? So he's really big. He's still, and this in my mind goes with that idea. He hasn't told MJ yet. We know that. He hasn't told the family, except again, May already knows. But he's really big on this idea of secret identity, even if it's just the two of them on a rooftop, because maybe somebody's listening and maybe somebody's doing something, but they are there staking out Fisk's office. They're going to bust in a minute, but that's the big play. And this is where it starts to get, starts for me, things are connecting. When they do bust in, they bust in the room. They're trying to make a big, brouhaha about it. They bust to the skyline. Glass flying everywhere. I believe they would think they're intimidating Fisk, or Fisk is going to be upset, whatever. Fisk is just pouring a scotch, and he says something you might want to keep in mind for the future. I mean, he's warning them right here. Something you might want to keep in mind for the future. Manhattan is mine, and every camera in a 3-block radius feeds into this building. Now, the idea of a 3-block radius, that will be something that, we might end up saying, okay, well, maybe what's going to happen won't be in that 3-block radius. But again, this is Fisk, who is part of the hidden people who are taking things over. He also ends up with the Bugle. He also ends up probably with a lot of ways to get information / video / picture / whatever. But he is spelling out right there, you're not going to be able to do much without me seeing it. That seems to be the big threat. If you do something, I'll be able to see it, and I'm already on you guys. I already was waiting. I already was 10 steps ahead of you when you came in here. But he says, so I'm aware that you two have been watching for days. I was beginning to wonder when you were going to go in. I was going to invite you in myself. And so they end up, okay. And there's kind of a lot of this stuff where when I think there's a big moment with this identity stuff, you end up having Hickman, and tell me if I'm wrong, you end up having little jokes and little kind of light things around it to almost make you kind of forget the threat that's being said. When you end up having Peter say in this last issue to Harry, we need code names, there's then a joke afterwards where Harry's like, what do you mean code names? What do you mean? And Peter says, oh, everybody's calling you Green Goblin. Who's everybody? Oh, people on the street, people on the internet. They're calling. And he's like, I don't want people naming me. And then when the whole thing, well, what do you want to be named? Green Goblin's pretty cool. It's a joke. And even in this where they are breaking into Fisk's office, and Peter has kind of gone through this idea of, hey, Harry, I've never really broken the law before. I feel weird, and I'm kind of not a bad guy. And when they bust in and Fisk says, I was expecting you, Harry turns to Peter and in a jokey way says, see, we were expected. So he didn't break the law. They were expected, and there's a little bit of a joke there. Then they have a huge fight, and the idea, too, before we get to the next item, is that Harry, they don't just come in and say, okay, Fisk, put up your dukes. We're going to fight. I don't like you. Starts talking about, we know what's going on. And you end up having Harry say, I know that you answer to someone, that all this goes much deeper than it appears, and we're here to find that out. And Fisk wants to know who said that. It is Bullseye. But he says, your assassin told me. And you go, but you are revealing to Fisk that the jig is up and gone, and everybody's going to have to react to this. This isn't just like minor stuff. So couple that in with the idea that Fisk said he's been watching, he has cameras or whatnot, because after this fight goes wrong and you end up having Harry's Goblin glider just blow up the side of the building that Fisk is in, which that's going to definitely cause some problems, probably some headlines in the Bugle and whatnot. But after that, Peter, he gets the crap kicked out of him, but he goes home, and this is where he then has to reveal his identity to the family. He's trying to lie at first and says, oh, I fell into a doorknob. Hey, I tripped and fell at the Bugle. And that's where May yells out, oh my God, that happened when you were a superhero. Oh my God. I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to say. It's a weird reaction by everybody, but one of the things that ends up happening with this is Mary Jane says to Peter, yeah, but are you safe? Peter, are we safe? And Peter says, yes, I believe so. And even the I believe so, that's a natural line, but I think that's also the idea where Hickman knows that's not so and doesn't want Peter to be a straight out liar to his wife and kids, but says, I believe so. No one knows who isn't a friend. I plan to keep it that way. And speaking of, hey, this has to be a family secret, so you guys can't tell anyone else. And I think you're going to get that play where people are like, okay, well, May's probably going to blurt out, but that's kind of a lighthearted deal. Maybe she'll end up, my hero's my dad, who's the hero Spider-Man, and, in class, and the teacher will come and whatnot. And I think it's bigger than this because, again, Fisk was just told that these two people, Goblin and Spider-Man, they know the secret of all secrets of this universe. Fisk, when the side of the building blows up and you end up having Peter and Green Goblin go off in the Goblin glider, you can't tell me that there's no interest of Fisk to follow what's going on, follow them, getting cameras to see where they go, all that. But it gets even worse because after Mary Jane and Peter calms her down, listen, I think that we're okay. They end up doing a very similar scene by the end of this issue, very similar to what happened with May. Remember May and Peter, hey, you want to go swing around? Oh, yeah. But May was definitely in a disguise, a homemade disguise, a scarf around her face and goggles on, but it's a disguise enough that people, if they saw Spider-Man with this little girl, would probably not be able to identify her, but they may have that picture somewhere already looking for maybe the next piece of evidence. And the next piece of evidence is in this book. And it's pretty bad. It's pretty much right up front. And I think that what Hickman's doing, and I think he's doing it perfectly if this is the case, is he's giving fans the moment they would want. A moment that we've seen. A moment that is Mary Jane holding on to the back of Spider-Man as they swing through New York City again. They go outside the apartment. They're swinging around. They're having a great time. It looks like a pinup. I think this is darker because of the fact that Fisk had said that he is watching. He has cameras. There's other people as well. Mary Jane has no disguise. This is Mary Jane. And again, I said earlier about a little kid, May, who would know how, she's not in the system, whatnot. Mary Jane is kind of known. They haven't spelled it out completely, but when she was talking to Harry and Gwen Stacy and discussing things, she ended up working for Norman Osborn, somebody who ends up where you have connection and even bits of businesses and things that kind of rolled over from Fisk into Harry after but who knows what he knows from that, but probably would be able to identify Mary Jane by her face, especially with what sort of resources he probably has from even the Maker's Council and things like that. But this is straight up swinging around, and I think that there is a very big difference where when I went back and saw, oh my God, when May and him were swinging around, she was in disguise. Mary Jane isn't. This is Peter almost going the whole run so far, saying we got to watch identities. But when he ends up, revealing the deal to Mary Jane, thinking she'd be upset, I think that he is actually so happy that she's accepting of it that he kind of forgets things and kind of in the moment, exciting, goes out and starts swinging around. As, again, people tell me, oh, this happens all the time. They've done this so many times. But again, this is right after a confrontation with Fisk, with him saying, I can follow you. I can see where you are. Gives him the warning. And then they throw it back in his face that they know more about the universe and whatnot. I'm not going to repeat myself so much here, but it looks like by the end, and what better way to disguise something that is so important by making it seem like such a feel-good moment? Doesn't that not make it worse if it does end up happening where this is the moment that dooms Mary Jane, a moment that a lot of people are like, we've been waiting for this forever. Oh my God, this is so great. Not realizing that it is not good and not something that Peter should do, but he hasn't been Spider-Man that long. He wouldn't really be able to connect some things, I think, in this whole deal. But that is my theory. And again, this is just a theory. I don't know. I don't have any issues ahead. I don't see anything, but a lot of people have been saying, even though Aunt May died, Aunt May's death has been kind of wiped aside a bit. Because a lot of people, when each issue comes out, and we're talking about it, and people in comments of the video reviews, things like that, keep bringing up, oh man, Peter needs to get that moment of great power, great responsibility. And wouldn't it be the idea that he let down his guard, let Mary Jane be exposed as a connection? This doesn't mean even the idea of straight up, even though I think Fisk would be smart enough, but it doesn't even have to be, okay, Mary Jane, well, that has to be Peter Parker. It could just be Spider-Man has a connection to Mary Jane, so we're going to capture Mary Jane and do stuff to her to get Spider-Man to come out, not even maybe realizing that it's even closer as a husband and wife. But maybe, just maybe, because Fisk may have met the family. Peter works at the Bugle, and they be able to connect. Okay, little girl with red hair like that. Well, I see Mary Jane. Mary Jane's married to Peter. They have a little girl. Okay, there's the connection. I had said all along that I thought little May was going to die as a deal. And boy, I hope that's not the case. But I also hope that it's not Mary Jane. And it does come down to that Mary Jane does end up dying as that moment. I wonder how people are going to react because of how much they love Mary Jane Peter together in this book and what that would mean. But it would be big. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you think that that might be the case, or like a lot of people tell me, no, I just think that it's just a fun little pinup at the end and it's a nice moment, whatnot. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel. Check out all of the notes in the description, all the different podcasts and things that we do. And also our Patreon account, patreon.com/weirdscience, where you have a bunch of different videos and shows and podcasts, all that stuff with Marvel, DC, indie pod, books, and even manga stuff. So check that out. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you all later.
Weird science is the revolution.